This demo is for the Stripes and Basics project that we're doing by hand with ruling pen and gouache. And so I've done my thumbnails at 2" by 2" on 10 square grid paper. I find that just a very easy measurement to do the math. So I have my stripe design, I have my zigzag, I have basket weave, I have a scallop, I have a Greek key, and I have a lattice, and down here my quatrefoil. Now, these are 2" squares, and what I'm intending to do is to enlarge these to 4" squares. So that's going to be really easy to figure out the math. For example, in the chevron, if I make little marks, each mark represents 1 inch. So from 2 inches up to 4 inches, it's going to be really easy to draw a grid in both directions. That is just dividing this in half. And so I'm going to draw 1 inch squares equaling 4 inches, and that'll work out perfectly. This one I'm going to break down into also into 1 inch squares, but I'm going to have to go to a smaller increment in this case. I'm going to actually go down to 1/4 inch, which will be halfway in between. And in some cases, I'm going to have to go divide that even in half, or just do it by eye as far as what thickness this is between the 1/4 inch. It doesn't have to be exact with a stripe. I mean, unless you have a project, you know, that you're really trying to be mathematical. But for example, this is a 1/4 inch. So if I straddle that amount, it's going to give me this line and this line. And then this also would be less than 1/8 of an inch. So you'll see in my full-size demo how I do that. But this one will be very clear cut, and this one as well. The basket weave is going to work out perfectly to 1 inch increments in both directions in a 4 inch high. Oops, I messed up. So that's going to be 1 inch, 1 inch, and then this would be a 1/2 inch to hit this mark. So there are going to be certain times where I'm going to have to split it into half. But for the most part, this will be exactly a 1 inch square in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now when I get to the basket weave, here is an exception. When I start counting how many grid squares this basket weave is made out of, it actually comes out to 5 in each direction. And so rather than trying to work with a very uneven dimension, if you were to divide 5 into 4, you're going to get an increment that's less than 1 inch, but not a round number. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge my basket weave up to 5 inches. So you don't have to work at the same size. You can work at 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, 6 inch, whichever works best for the design. So I'm going to actually bump this up to 5 inches because if you look at the increments, it breaks down into 5 segments this direction and 5 segments this direction. So that it's going to make my life a lot easier if I do this into a 5 inch grid. Then I get back to the scallop, and this one works very nicely as a 4-inch. So it's going to be 4-inch in each direction. And these, where I'm making these little nick marks, is where I'm going to draw grid lines out. And because this is a has a circular design, I also want to make sure I have a template that matches that. So if you are going to work at 4 inches, make sure that your circle template goes up to 2 inches because you're going to need it for that. If you, for some reason, have a circle template that's much smaller, you can always reduce this down and do a 2-inch square, just like we see here, or whatever size you want. Now we're on the Greek key, and when I look at this, the way that the Greek key is drawn is that I have this bold stroke in the middle, and then you notice how that the sides are skinny. They're half the dimension. The reason is because when I put this into repeat, this is going to double up over here and create the full thickness, and the same when this repeats on that side, and the same with the top and bottom. So what I'm going to do is analyze this and think about how many of these increments do I have to make up this Greek key. So I have to think about, this is really the increment I'm dealing with, and this is double that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this would work really wonderfully as a 10-inch design, but since I don't really want to work that big, I'm going to go 5 inches, half of that. So each one of these increments would equal a half an inch. 1/2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches. So I'm going to work out a 5-inch overall square, and I'm going to break it into half-inch increments. Next, we get to the lattice. Now this one's the most complicated that we've done so far. Now this one also has the same thickness as the Greek key, and but I also have these half spaces on the side, because again, when they match up, they're going to make an increment they're going to make a white space that's the same thickness as this. So what I want to do here is I actually need to break it down into these, actually 10 grid, the actual grid paper, 10 by 10. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm also going to do this one at 5 inches, but I'm going to draw a grid that's every 1/4 inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, so that equals 1 inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches, and it works in the same direction. So this will be a 5-inch square with 1/4 inch increments. Then we get to the quatrefoil, and this is a more complex combination of curves with straight lines. And so this one I actually wanted to work on it at the 5-inch size, but I realized my circle template doesn't go up that big. I would need a 2.5-inch diameter circle template, and my circle template only goes up to 2 1/4. So I decided to go smaller. It also breaks into increments of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, or sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would also work beautifully as a 10-inch design, but I don't have a circle template that goes up that big. And I don't even have one that works with the 5-inch, because I need a 2.5-inch for this larger circle. So I'm going to reduce it down to 2.5 inches, with each of these increments equaling 1/2 an inch. So a half, and then 1, half, half, 1, half, half, 1, half, half, 1, half, half, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Actually, 1/4 inch, sorry. 1/4 inch, and then half, 1/4 inch, half, 1/4 inch, half, 1/4 inch, half, 1/4 inch, half. And so here is actually 1 inch total, and that's 2.5 inches, and it goes in both directions. So I'm going to draw a grid that is I'm going to draw an overall square that's 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to draw a grid that's every 1/4 inch, and I'm going to use a 1 1/4 inch circle for these larger circles. Then I have to account for an 1/8 of an inch stroke. So actually, sorry, a quarter. This is a 1/4 inch. So the inner circle, the smaller one, has to be 3/4 of an inch, because what you do is take the 1 1/4 and subtract a 1/4 from one side and a 1/4 from the other side, and that leaves you with a 3/4 inch for the inner circle. So you'll see how I do it in the full-size demo. Hope that helps. I'm ready to paint my surface designs now, my stripes and other basics projects, and I wanted to show you that I have my mood board here, and from my set of gouache, I've mixed together my 5 custom colors. I have an assortment of brushes, and you'll just have to figure out what works best for you. I have 2 cups of water to clean my brushes, and I have my artwork and I have my scratch paper ready to go. So I'm going to just move this now out of the way, and you don't need to tape this down at this point unless you want to. Because I'm working at angles, I want to be able to move it around freely. So it was important when I was drawing it out, but not as important when I'm doing the painting. And in fact, we're going to do this one with a ruling pen, and then I'm going to show you the scallops done with just by hand. So I also have a ruler that has masking tape on the back, and if you can buy it with either the cork back, and if it doesn't have cork, you can add masking tape. It just needs to be raised and not all the way to the edge. So I'm also starting with, I have 3 ruling pens. I have a set of 3. They're in different sizes, and I might want to switch to the small one, but I'm going to start with the medium one. Sorry, this is the small one. I'm going to start with the medium one first and see how that works for me. So the first thing we want to do is add paint to the ruling pen, and I'm using a palette here to sort of bring in just a little bit of paint because I don't want to add water to my full container here in case I go to, unless I add too much water in one swoop. And I want to hold the pen sort of upright and let gravity pull it down. And then I'm going to now test it on my scratch paper, and it's too tight. So I'm going to loosen this just a tiny bit and see if I can get paint to come out. Okay, it's starting to come out. And then you can decide if you can get a nice line. This is not a very nice line. Then that means that the paint is too thick. So I'm going to start over. I have water off camera. I just don't want to have it too close to my actual work area. So you want to have paper towels handy, and so I'm just going to add a little more water with my brush to the paint and try to get it just a little thinner. It's actually more like milk than half and half. And I'm just going to add it again. And this time, let's see, I think I have to tighten it just a tiny bit. It looks like it's okay, so there's a pretty good line. I'm going to move this out of the way because it's got wet paint on it and bring my ruler in. And then I'm just going to work at an angle that's comfortable. And I'm just going to very carefully line up my ruler and draw that line. Now I'm going to do a random color palette here, so I'm going to just go ahead and randomly choose a different parallelogram to fill in. Let's go with, I'll go across, kind of across my design. Now I would normally work this all out ahead of time, like maybe do a thumbnail sketch like I showed you in pencil, but do it in colored pencil or markers to sort of work out where my colors are going to be. And then for you, since you're using ruling pens for the first time, I would recommend that you let this dry before you do this next step, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it because to save time, I need to kind of rush through this. But if you're less experienced, I do not recommend that you do this. Wait until it's dry. I need to load more paint into my ruling pen. I'm definitely going to let it dry between colors though. So I've got my scratch paper off camera, but I'm testing it to make sure that it works. And then I'm just going to very gently and carefully match up the corners. And again, this is only something I would do after you've had a lot of practice, because otherwise it's just too easy to run into your wet lines and mess up the nice work that you've just completed. So now that that is done, I'm going to rinse off my ruling pen And I'm just dipping it in my cup of water and shaking it. And now that, since I already have this paintbrush loaded with the right color, I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. And if you're not skilled with brushes, just don't go close to the edge right away. I'm going to use this larger brush, and I'm going back to my thicker paint that's inside my cup. Now, I did add a little bit of water when I mix my colors together. I recommend not using paint directly out of the tube. I mean, in other words, a straight color. So even if you have a color, like this turquoise, this teal color was pretty close to what came in the tube. It's a little brighter, but your color is going to come out more opaque if you're adding either white to the color, a little tiny bit of black to the color, or another color mixing in with the color, and probably some white or black. So in this case, I took the one out of the tube and I mixed in white, quite a bit of white, and just a tiny bit of lime green. Just so it got it a little closer to what's on my mood board, and also it's going to help your color be more opaque. If you, certain colors, like particularly like blue, like royal blue, ultramarine blue, it will not cover unless you add something to it. So it's better to mix your own colors. And again, also, if you're not that experienced with a brush, I would switch to a thinner brush at this point, like something like this is a 1, like a 1 or even a 0 to do the parts close to the edge. Now, even though I colored that in, you can see it's not completely opaque. Now, that's actually a look you can go with. If you remember on my mood board, the Quatrefoil had a lot of brush strokes, like a wash fill to it, and that's fine. I'm going to now cover up this paint, because you don't want your paint to get dehydrated, and I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to move on to the scallop right now. So let me find that. I have all my sketches quite far away because I don't want them to get, I don't want to spill my water or spill my paint and have them accidentally get in there. Now, actually, I might as well use the teal while my brush is still dirty. So I'm going to do a multicolored scallop. Now, I also, one thing I forgot to mention is I want to actually lighten my pencil lines as much as possible before I paint, because when you work with colors like, let's say, a yellow or like a light pink or something like that, it's the pencil lines are going to show through, and you're going to have to do extra coats of paint. And we don't need all these pencil lines at this point. We need the sides of the square, but we don't need to see them this dark. So without getting into that wet paint, I'm going to just very carefully and slowly get rid of these pencil lines and all the eraser debris. Be careful not to get my wet paint. Okay, so I'm painting this in with the larger brush first. And then I'm going to switch to the smaller brush and do the edges. It's better to do it this way because sometimes you can get closer to the edges than you think, and it'll just save you time. I'm just going to get as close as I can without actually hitting the line. And I really do need a smaller brush to get into these corners. So I'm going to switch to my number 1. And then I'm just going to very carefully go to the corners, and then I'm just going to just carefully follow my pencil line. And I'm brushing in the direction of my curve. And if you're right-handed, kind of a downward motion in the shape of the curve, and if you're left-handed, just do it in the opposite direction. But you don't want to be going this way. You normally want to go this way. It's going to be just a more natural angle when you hold the brush, and you're not fighting upstream basically or against yourself. So again, I switched it so that I can now go this way. I just don't want to go paint upwards. Now I'm going to switch to my yellow, and I'm going to switch brushes too, so that I don't have to go into the kitchen and clean all my brushes. I'll do that when I've finished at least 2 colors. If you have enough brushes. If you don't have enough brushes, then you'll just have to make extra trips. So again, I'm starting with a thicker brush. This one is about a 4, and the other one I was using was, I think a 6 maybe. But this one's close enough. I'm gonna also just fill in the larger areas first. Okay, I'm switching back to my zigzag now because the blue is dry and I want to move as quickly through this so it's not taking me all day. You can, of course, cycle through all 7 of your patterns in sort of a factory assembly line, you know, to allow things to dry and even work with the same color while you have the paintbrushes wet. That would be actually a good time-saving idea. Now, whenever you do a scallop design or any kind of design that bleeds off the sides, you need to make sure these two are the same color. You can do anything that you want in the middle. It can be completely random, but these two need to match and these two need to match each other because they're going to match up in the repeat. I'm also going to save myself a little bit of time by not using the ruling pen along this edge, because you can actually go outside the lines here because it's going to get cropped off. Now, just like the two red ones have to match up, the two gray ones need to match up, the two sides here, and they also need to match up at in these top two corners. This scallop will also match up here, whatever color we go with there, and these, all four corners need to be the same color in order to match up. Now, because this is still slightly tacky, but I want to keep moving, I'm just going to cover it up with a piece of paper. We call this a slip sheet. You could use tracing paper, vellum, regular, this is just regular bond paper, but that will, it's almost dry. I wouldn't do this if it was really, really wet, but I'm going to get this lined up first and do that last line.